Welcome to Learning cEDH, the podcast dedicated to teaching you everything you need to know about competitive Commander. I'm your host, Matthew, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Eric. And today, we're bringing you a little bit different of an episode. We're not going to be diving into the details of a meta game or what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Today, we're just talking about some cool things that we would like to see for Magic and Commander as a whole, but specifically cEDH for the year of 2024. This is going to be our kind of wish list of things that we would like to see. These can be either like new types of cards or changes or even just artworks or finished cycles specifically. Anything that we might want to see for the year. I think this would be kind of a fun, just kind of chill episode where we get to talk about things that we like and kind of get to be hopeful for the year of 2024 in Magic.
We've had enough of negativity in the community per se. I just would like to just have a kind of a fun wish list things, and some that because we discussed this kind of before the year happened. Yeah, some of them already happened, which was kind of cool. So
yeah, I would say there's only of the list that we have. We might go off script here a bit if we think of anything cool, but I think of the list we have, there's only one I would say is negative in terms of there's one about stuff that we don't want, but for the most part, yeah, it's just kind of stuff we hope to see and either some shakeups for the format. Before we hop into this, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, giving us a good rating on your podcast service wherever you listen to us, or just giving us good feedback on what you want to hear. Brand new year, we're wide open for topics that you want to see covered. You can get access to early videos like this and other good perks over on Patreon. Go get some cool cEDH merch over on Spring. So with all that being said, let's hop into it. Looking to run a great cEDH event? Having hosted over 100 successful tournaments, Eminence Gaming has your back with Command Tower. With its intuitive tournament manager dashboard, you can handle everything from deck list submission to player management in just a few clicks. Then, all players need to do is scan a generated QR code to have access to your full tournament bracket. Put your players first with seamless pairing software and real-time access to standings. Take the guesswork out of tournaments. Give Command Tower a try for your next event. All right, which one you want to start with?
Well, let's talk about the things that were going to be on the list, but actually already happened. So before the new year, I think it was the week right before Christmas or right at the time of Christmas, they announced that there is a foil Japanese culling ritual. Or sorry, culling the week. I already messed that up.
Everybody
Foil
does
Japanese, it. Yeah. I mean, it is a ritual, but a foil Japanese culling the week. This is the first time this card has ever been foiled. Previously, you could get it in the Japanese language. I have one, and this is kind of unique because there's not a foil English version of it, and it was in some kind of manga book from Japan that you had to order from Amazon. So as soon as I saw it, I followed the links, so ordered the book. It was it got here right after Christmas. Opened it up, actually very good foiling. I was very impressed with the color and how rich the card was. It's the original artwork, which is super sweet because we don't see that kind of gritty, dark art like that as much anymore. You could say some things are very AI based. No, I'm just joking. I don't want to. I don't want to get anybody heated on that one. But yeah, so Culling the Week was awesome. It was a great addition to my collection, as I know many others, and it just gives us that one step closer to that all foil Japanese deck. I don't know if people know, but 2024 is the year of the dragon. So Wizards of the Coast is coming out with a promo set, fun ones. There's some basic lands. They all have dragon artwork. And then they finally reprinted Corvold as a foil Japanese card. He finally got his reprint and it looks very sweet. And you alluded to something that's actually really interesting about the art, about how they redesigned the whole commander, but it's still Corvold.
Yeah, he has a lot of the recognizable sort of features of his colors and kind of everything around him. It's almost like the same scene-ish, but it's completely reimagined as an Eastern style dragon instead of the more European Camelot style stuff that we got for Throne of Eldraine. They showed the card, at least the picture I first saw was it fully Japanese. You didn't have to look at the text or anything. You just be oh, Corvold. Oh my god, new Corvold art. Finally. And because this is something we complained about halfway through last year, just where's Corvold? Why no Corvold? And then we finally get it.
Yeah, it looks very cool. That card will come in Japanese, Chinese, and English.
I think in general, that was one I didn't think about, but like the fake reserve list cards that they're just like, there are just so many cards that still have never gotten a reprint. Those getting reprints, it could just go on this wish list. There are just so many random cards from throughout Magic, and we've hit a lot of them. Some of them have been hit in like secret layers or some of like the commander product, especially like they're really catching up on like the Portal 3 Kingdoms cards, where most of those at this point have new printings. Just in general, there's too many to even list here. So just any card that has not got a reprint and it's older than one that's very cEDH playable that's like getting kind of old at this point is Mindbreak Trap. Where is the Mindbreak Trap reprint? I thought it was coming in like around Ixalan. So I thought they were gonna do a trap thing because one of the first cards they showed for that set was this like spider trap card that didn't even actually end up being in the set, which confuses me. Yeah, any of those kind of like pseudo reserve list cards, especially ones that are like from the 90s and have yet to got a reprint, those could absolutely go on the wish list here for cards that we would like to see reprinted this year.
Yeah, I have 3 specifically, and that's Orcish Lumberjack, Tinderwall, and Necromancy.
Very quickly go through one of the negative ones that we talk about a lot, and that's something that had a conversation at the beginning of this year, as it just tends to happen every like month or so. Just ban Rhystic Study. Just go ahead, rip the band-aid off. We've talked about, we're not going to go into big detail on this card, of course. And we've talked about not even just from like a cEDH meta perspective. Oh, it's the most annoying card. Oh, whatever. Everything about it at every power level, how it plays, how strong it is, what it does to games, the annoyance of it, one-sided Stax pieces that are too good for multiplayer, just like everything about it. Let's just rip this band-aid off and be done with it. And then if we're wrong, unban it. We're not wrong. It would stay banned. It would just be an improvement all around. But ban lists, you can kind of just go back and forth if you really wanted to.
Can we unban Primeval Titan?
Oh yeah, we absolutely should. I mean, I already have a video on that. You can check that out here if I remember to put the thing on it of cards that should be unbanned.
Yeah, it was really funny. Drake Sasser posted a thing, and he goes, "Primeval Titan's banned, but Kadama of the East Tree is legal. Have you seen this card being played and what it does in games?" Like, but people get so sensitive over the ban topic one way or another. There's people that will literally, you can tell that when they're typing, they're yelling while they're doing it. They're just like, but where they'll get upset and they'll be like, just pay the one, and all this garbage. Like, listen, I have no desire to ever have a full like fleshed out conversation on Twitter, because inherently Twitter is a limiting format, and then when you're trying to respond to somebody else jumps in. It's just less like, if you want to have a realistic conversation about something, just message me. That's a waste of my time. That's a waste of my resources and mental brain power, to go into like a full in-depth, pseudo-philosophical like conversation about the spirit of the format and Rhystic Study and, play patterns and all that. Like, leave that for a podcast or something.
I definitely think there are people who, when you bring up any kind of discussion, hey, let's change the game that you play, that they immediately think of like how it impacts them. And they're like, oh, but I win with Rhystic Study. Oh, but I win when I'm on the draw and I draw and I get to draw first. Also, let's put that on the wish list. Why does the player going first get to draw in this garbage format? Let's just be done with that too. Just that's a freebie for you guys. Just if you're going first, no, you don't get to draw. But if you watch any of my video, usually I do these kind of separate. I don't think we've done things on like power level or bannings in a podcast, but I really try to dive into what it does to an ecosystem, what it does for player incentives, what it does across power levels sometimes. And I think especially it's good to like separate yourself from these discussions. And some people just don't do that, and they don't care, they just don't tend to think that way. I have mainly played Blue Farm and Rogsai for the past year. I have won many games with Rhystic Study. Do I think that it makes positive play patterns or benefits the format for existing? I think it gets even worse the lower you scale in power level. It's just a problem at the high end as well. Yeah, I think it's just a net negative. You can win games of Magic other ways. You don't need Rhystic Study to do it. Just sum up what I don't like about it all in general is I think asymmetrically punishing players for casting spells in general is a negative for Magic. And Rhystic Study does it. You don't have to build around it. It is naturally just there. It's not like a sphere of resistance kind of thing. You build around it. That's completely different. It's a terrible comparison. You don't have to dive into your own what you want in the game. I think that's a bad way to look at bans if you want to like talk about the health and the long-term thing. If you're casually invested in cEDH, I can kind of see just like, oh no, that's a card I use. I don't want it banned. But as someone who's like, a few years ago was like, I think this format is going to be huge. I want to help it get bigger. I actually think cards like that in the long term make things a little bit worse, especially when we talk about like the perception of the format with how like tournament play goes and how I think it's really got bogged down. We talk about this all the time of what Ken Bauman likes to call mid-range hell, of just what this game actually is at the kind of highest level, what it looks like. We could do without it.
But Matt, back in my day, I had to play Flash uphill both ways.
Oh, that's true.
So
That's true.
oh my gosh.
And you'll notice unbanning Flash isn't on this list because I don't care about it. It was just the thing I put in that video. I just wanted to talk about Gristlebrand in that video. That's really all I wanted to talk about. Is like Gristlebrand's gotten more broken. Gristlebrand, we can't take him off the ban list. He's too good now. He's gotten even better. Flash, whatever. It would be fine anyways. But you guys, it's fine that you guys are wrong. It's okay.
I just had to bring it up because that guy's comment on like your video about it. You know, for viewers who have happened to listen to our last one that we did together, we were just going over the like highest performing decks of the last quarter and also of 2023. And someone goes, "Yeah, hard to trust the opinions of a guy who wants Flash unbanned," referring to Matt. And Matt just he put it in a way that only he could, because I would totally be a jackwagon and respond, but it was basically like, yeah, good thing these are based on like data and like not our opinions. Like I still to this day don't understand how people confuse our videos with tier lists like other people's videos, because we list the criteria based on EDH top 16.com. Please go check that website out. It is the best. And people will be like, "I don't agree with your opinion." And I'm like, it's not an opinion.
Yeah.
It's not an opinion on the it's an opinion on the data that is presented. It's completely different. No matter what I think, I can't make Rogsai any higher than the data presents itself.
If it shows up at 9th, we're not going to put it at 6th. It's there. We can talk about it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's people skimming, you know. I don't expect every single viewer to watch the entire video. I do think for purposes of tier lists or in general, it is really helpful to listen to the criteria at the start. If you skim through the start to get to the list, you are going to miss out on, you know, sometimes key things, because we don't just do a top 10 based on our opinions. We've tried to make that intro very easy to digest and really explain it. Sometimes people just skip over it. I can't help that. If you want to skip it, I can't help you. Let's talk about because you just mentioned EDH top 16, and we can talk about one of the other great things we got from Eminence, which is Command Tower. Command Tower was a huge, hard to understate this, like major game changer for the way that both Commander events are ran, and not even just Commander. It's especially helped us as people focus on, you know, Commander as a tournament format, but just running events in general. But it has especially helped running events for smaller TOs who don't have experience. It's made it very easy. And then for us as content creators, made it extremely easy to look at results for events, follow the brackets. It's made everything about Commander tournaments so much easier for everyone. One thing it hasn't done is it hasn't been adopted by everyone. And I think that would be a pretty major game changer, specifically when talking about SCG and international scenes that just haven't adopted it. And part of that is that's not really them being stubborn. I don't think. I think that's a lot of like language barriers being broken through, and really making it worth it for those sort of organizers who, like, when we talk about the Japanese men, a lot of them know what they're doing in terms of running events. They probably don't feel the need to like, oh, I have to use this other software, blah, blah, blah. But what that can do for the whole, I think it would be huge if it wasn't just, you know, me and then maybe one other content creator or something that really showcases Japanese events. I think really having everybody get to see very easily on the main sort of hub that we use now of the combination of Command Tower and EDH Top 16 events in Japan and in Europe and Brazil that we don't always get to see unless you really go digging for it. And removing that kind of digging has been a big game changer for our events already.
Yeah, and Europe themselves, they have pretty much adopted Command Tower by and large. I know they're really accessible in terms of just like talking to somebody, and this is not inherently like me like throwing a jab at SEG, but I've reached out. I know other pro Magic players have reached out to SEG about posting their deck list and or at least giving the standings of the deck list. And they don't do that. I know Zane got all the information from several SCGs ago. He manually, I believe, I could be wrong, but he manually input like all those deck lists because they were like paper or whatever, and it just made it really. It's such a challenge and it's a lot of work. And other like MTG Top 8 has all the deck list, but they're not in order. It just lists the 80 some odd decks and breaks them down into commanders, not in the placement that they have. And so the only deck list they post is first place, which Blue Farm won the recent one and also won the one before that. But I digress. If you're going to take advantage of like cEDH growing, cool, that's awesome. Because I would love to support and talk about the SCG events.
Yeah.
Because, we always talk about Mox Masters or Chaos and all the Eminence events coming up. And, any of the like the big circuit style things, or even like some of the bigger locals and that type of, that type of stuff. I know we got like a 10K coming up in April, along with Punt City 3 and other big Eminence events that sold out in 21 minutes. It's pretty wild.
I was gonna say, we can't really promote. I didn't have an opportunity to promote Punt City 3, and it didn't need it. There's no way I could have got a video out in the 20 minutes that it was available for sale and reach anybody and have them be able to it's gone. I can't help it. They just, those ones they saw it immediately.
And if Star City wants to do their own thing, that's fine. Just making it more accessible for the players because then you get knuckleheads like us talking about your tournament. That's awesome. That grows your event for free. You literally pay us $0 for it. And we just get to talk about it. Instead, I'm kind of putting you in a negative light, and because you're withholding information, and if you don't want your commander scene to grow, that's fine. Don't, it's not my responsibility, but we just want to help this community grow, and seeing how like Eminence and those before Eminence kind of pioneered everything and growing up, everybody's kind of like jumping in on it and kind of riding the coattails of it. So
they also provide sort of a unique perspective because they are, from my perspective, kind of negatively so, one of the only organizers that doesn't allow proxies or playtest cards. In terms of like the future of cEDH, especially when we talk about one of these other wishlist items, that could be very large prestigious events that for a lot of reasons can't allow proxies to show up. And what those kind of like Swiss rounds look like is the only glimpse we get of those is like kind of current day non-proxy events. Like SCG, you could argue, has like a good representation of what large cEDH events will look like in the future if proxies weren't allowed. So that they have like kind of unique, and the Japanese events, most of them as well, kind of have that same perspective. Plus, they're just on their own stuff anyways over there. That is just something we'd like to see, is Command Tower continue to be adopted by large organizers, small organizers, until the vast majority of events are able to easily be, covered. All right, what you want to talk about next?
Let's talk about green cards.
Okay, they're bad.
So, yeah, we've discussed this. Green cards and doing what green cards do well are pretty good. Guy's Cradle's a pretty good Magic card. Look at Ken decks. They're great. I don't, obviously, like, they don't print cards for our format specifically, though I think they're more aware than not of like what cEDH is,
coming into question, I think whether they
definitely high powered commander for sure. Like, because they literally have commander specific sets, and a lot of those like powerful cards that we see that are printed like modern sets and whatnot, they're very much translate over to cEDH a large number of times. Like, we've seen some cards even in standard that have translated to cEDH, like Beseech the Mirror, just being a very solid, powerful tutor. Invasion of Ikoria, that's another recent one that's kind of, it's not broken, it's just good, and it sees a lot of play. Atraxa, that's another great example of a card that literally hit every niche available, good in every format it's legal in, basically. What I would like to see is not inherently a specific green card, but green cards taking advantage of what green can do mechanically to just kind of improve the card quality of the pool. Do we need more dorks? Probably not. We see tons of dorks, but I would like to see kind of like the for example, like Autumn's Veil and Veil of Summer. I would like to see that cycle finished, like Veil of Spring and Veil of Winter, or Winter's Veil, or something like that. I would like to see like more interaction. Again, green not having like the ability to truly like fight some of this stuff in our format as a whole, and I know what happens when we get good green cards like that. They typically affect like other formats. Like for the longest time, like Veil was super powerful
Yeah.
in standard. It was very it's very powerful. It was in modern, but now it's a good sideboard card. It's a good
Mhm.
sideboard card in Legacy. And, the hubbub of those cards are just kind of meh. You know what I mean? It's not like it's this overarching oppressive thing.
Yeah, one mana cryptic command was kind of crazy when it first when it first came out. And one thing I wanted to touch on when you talked about their designing for cEDH or thinking about high power commander is if you listen to like Wizards of the Coast employees, they really specifically check for combos. It's something that's really on top of their mind. So whenever something comes out that has a combo, that was like intentional. Almost always, especially when it's a commander that has a combo, they know there's a combo there. So they basically allow that to happen. So whenever you have a commander that comes out, it's like, oh, this combos with this. It wasn't an accident. I promise you. Especially if it's a commander. And I think in general, they're allowing more and more to come through because they get that that's the way people play, especially at higher power levels.
I was going to say, and also too, that's just kind of the natural progression of any Magic player. If somebody who's just playing the card game fresh and no other experience really with other card games, and they've got like a group of friends, it becomes an arms race. It's just
You want to win.
people want to win. People want to get better. I know, newsflash, Commander, they're still supposed to have a winner.
Yeah.
I know people
They
don't
declare a
like hearing
winner, turns
they
out.
do declare a winner. You do play to win. So that's something that's just pretty interesting. I would like to see more green cards in that vein. Like I said, the type of Veil cards. I thought like Legolas's quick reflexes
Mhm.
was, again, pretty neat in that regard. It's still super specific. In my opinion, though, it's a good card. It's fine. What, Matt? Like, give me an example of a green card you would like to see them print.
Oh God. Okay. So one thing.
One-sided oof.
Yeah, we talked about that before the show, one-sided roof, and how insane that would go. So one thing we talked about last episode was that green, in comparison to some colors, is more of like a workhorse. They have really good mid-level cards that kind of support what they want to do. They have, the dorks couldn't ask for really better dorks at this point, reasonably. Their sort of ability to recur things or tutor up creatures, they're really strong in that regard. I don't know that they could make a better creature tutor. I don't know that that's necessarily what they need or that would be something they're going to do. I think a solid green win con, maybe with less moving pieces, could be something we could see. You mentioned interaction. I do think something that doesn't, like endurance to deal with Oracle is so iffy. We've seen stifle effects get to be in green. I think you could, some kind of like modal card that can answer really powerful things with like a stifle being one of the effects on it could be interesting. I don't know. It also could have been like, there are just cards that could have been green that we've talked. Like, if you actually think about it, Underworld Breach could have been a green card. They made Gaia's Will. Arguably, it would have been more of a green card. One of my points is that I don't know if they actually need more mid-level utility cards or if they actually do just need a very broken card that really pulls you into green. We kind of talked about how we don't necessarily want like a staple that's like, oh, now instead of Timnacrom, we're on, Malcolm Vile.
Thrasfile.
Yeah, Thrasfile, I don't necessarily want that, but I don't know what I'm looking for in like a mid-level green card. Because like you said, like the dorks, we got that covered. We got a lot of the stuff covered. We talked about, and another one that we talked about is like playable junk cards. I really want a green card that makes junk. I think it would be really sick. I think green has gotten a lot of cards that actually generate artifacts historically. That's just the thing that you're allowed to do in green. You can make map tokens, you can make clues, treasures. Do we get green dockside that makes junk tokens? That would be very broken. I wouldn't mind a very broken green card that's very pip intensive. I don't know what exactly you make it look like, but some kind of green card that is like, oh, they resolved this. It's very good for their deck. It's very questionable for my 4-color deck because it's triple green pips. Or even double green pips with a green activation, like something that really leans it. And I think that's just something I want in general for cards. If you make a broken red card, I would like for it to be more pip intensive.
So like a card like how Beseech is triple black and white.
Yeah, like that's a really powerful card that blue farm, you could run it. You're not likely to. Even Necropotence is a good example. That's a busted card. Not a lot of decks actually choose to run.
Yeah, because well, a lot of people think it's bad.
Yeah, either they're like, it's too much for their color, their mana base to support, or like, they're just not trying to do that proactive or all in of a game plan.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. I'll take a green Esper Sentinel. That's something green
Yes.
legitimately lacks is the ability to draw cards or like maybe like Glimpse of Nature stapled on a creature, something like that.
I think a thing that they don't dip into is how green hates on artifacts and enchantments in a proactive way. Like if you did it like that to where like Charismatic Conqueror is a card that if it was instead of creatures, it was artifacts and enchantments. That could be like a really cool green card that makes like 1/1s with whatever. You can make it really crazy, make it like 3 mana and it makes like Llanowar Elves. It spits out a Llanowar Elf every time somebody has an artifact in their battlefield. Like there are definitely things you could do that fit green color pie, but they kind of put it in white. I don't want asymmetrical artifact hate like we talked about. One-sided oof. Green will play it. Green will be good. Do we need it? How much mana would that have to cost? That has to be like a 4-drop probably. That might already be a 4-drop. I don't know. But yeah, like green Esper Sentinel-ish kind of thing. That could be cool. That would be staple-y, but again, it isn't. Anything that you can print that isn't a blue farm staple, I'm probably fine with you printing it. So I think green could get some broken cards for right now.
You know, maybe I was gonna say a more powerful Sylvan Library. That would be kind of cool.
It would be interesting. You'd probably need it for them to design it. It would have to have some kind of multiplayer focused thing, probably for them to want to make it. I do think leaning into like green gets card selection and like some card advantage, they're really not supposed to just naturally draw a lot of cards all at once without some kind of like, if you have a bunch of creatures, you're allowed to do it. But they've talked about how like Harmonize is a color pie break. You're not supposed to be able to do that. Yeah, I think some kind of upgrade like a Sylvan Library, like if you want to lean into like mid-range green tools, something that gives them selection and advantage that isn't just like, oh, your opponent played the game. Oops, you get to draw or whatever. Even utilizing some of the tokens that we've made, like green cards that make clues off of like, that's so much more fair. Like a green card, you can make a green Smothering Tithe that makes clues. It's not going to be broken. You can make that cheap probably. That could be like a 2-drop. There's definitely a lot of room. Maybe for this video, I'll make some green cards I'd like to see and put them on the screen here. And maybe we can talk about them next time too. Cause I like making custom cards. But one thing, Eric especially likes to talk about, and I mentioned too, is that red is very good at the top end of red. If you get to put red into your deck, that's a huge upgrade to what you get to do. But it's not because of the depth of the cards you get access to. You're looking at like 2 of the best cards in the format. And then like some of the kind of top-ish, like sorceries you might want, few creatures you're going to want. So it's really, really, really top-heavy. And it would be really nice to get some kind of mid-level, okay red cards. They need to be cEDH playable, of course, so they have to be kind of powerful, but they don't need to be Underworld Breach and Dockside. Those cards are very clearly, I imagine, designs they're going to avoid going forward. But something on the power level of like, these cards we were talking about, like honestly, is Esper Sentinel at that power? Is that too high of a power level?
Probably is.
Probably is.
Like an Archivist of Ogma level card, Fairy Mastermind level card, Ledger Shredder level card. Those just like in terms of like creatures that are just solid, decent 2-drops. And then, though I did mention that, what was that red creature that we talked about from Ixalan? Inti. Yeah, that card's probably pretty good and probably underplayed in some capacity, but it's a really solid card. Decent red cards that allow you to get to the game plan, because when people say the classic, well, red's really good because of Dockside and Underworld Breach, but so we should never have new red powerful cards printed because of Dockside and Underworld Breach. Those cards were printed a while ago now. Like, and then another one's like Deflecting Swat. Well, Deflecting Swat's not universal. Not every commander gets to play with Deflecting Swat. Some commanders can't because whether they're too expensive or they're not on the board, those type of things. But yeah, and when you start breaking red down, what are you going to have? Like if the 2 red blast, effectively red and pyroblast, are in your top 10, that's a problem in terms of your power levels of cards. Nothing really powerful has been printed for red, unless I'm just silly and forgetting something, and I'm talking about like just a decent staple that kind of like, bridges the gap. It's a good 1-drop, maybe a good 2-drop. Ragavan was solid, and Ragavan's a good card, but and that was probably the best recent red card in memory that we've had. But like, when you look at red cards, they're always like kind of derpy or clunky or something like that.
So things that are very red that we don't actually have a lot of good ones of is like removal spells. Some decks run things like Delayed Blast Fireball, like things like, but something that's like a little bit better and more playable than that, right? I don't expect Lightning Bolt 2.0, but something that can really help you like remove multiple creatures at a time with direct damage, I think could be really cool to see. Making it an instant, all the better, but you know, as long as it's efficient enough for multiplayer. If it was like a 2-mana bolt that's like sorcery speed and it's like for each opponent, you deal 3 to something they have, either them or something they control. Like that's like a reasonable-ish multiplayer design. Tweak the numbers around. Like that would probably be cEDH playable, especially with the lower color. Like every Omnix list player slamming that. Get rid of 3 Draenus at once. I'm slamming it. Just as an idea, like removal, we saw them print a new really bad gamble with the one that gets an artifact. Them just dealing with their artifact synergies in general. That's, you know, there's lots of cool artifact things that they could lean into. We see like red could totally get something like a Snapcaster Mage. Like that's very much in red's sort of pie. You could do something like that. It doesn't have to be that broken, but it has to be like something like Dreadhorde Arcanist just doesn't fit cEDH that well.
Yeah,
it doesn't fit how we do it. Even like not Robber the Rich, the Starfleet Daredevil kind of works, but again, it doesn't work at the speed that we do things here. So yeah, removal, interaction, decent creatures that let you do things every turn, you know, that gets you incidental value in a very red way, whether it's impulse drawing, dealing damage, or making treasures, or whatever. I think like Lotho is a good example of a card that is good in the decks that want to play it, but it isn't like, oh my god, you get to play Lotho. This is just game. It's not a dockside. It's good, but it's not a dockside.
Again, very simple cards that smooth out just playable creatures, like playable creatures at the 1 and the 2. They just keep printing these 3 drops, and it like, I don't know, it just feels like it like gluttons up the deck list. And I don't understand, like I don't know why they're afraid to print like tutors in red that are legitimately decent. People talk about like, well, how would they print these cards? Would they come into like a modern set? Well, if you look at modern has access to Beseech the Mirror and Diabolic Intent and Infernal Tutor, and none of those cards are too powerful at all. So, and you can see, and we had like a powerful commander printed, like that's pretty cool. Is like Atali,
yeah,
like that was like a cool like red green card, whatever you want to look at. But I just think having higher quality cards because like again, it's the design of Magic, it's the fundamental flaw of the game of how they even created the color pie to begin with. Is like, you know, blue black gets Talion, like. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, oh, yeah, Rhystic Study, but, you know, I'll tell you what, we're going to put it on a 3/4 flyer that also, like, literally does everything else. Like, yeah, just some decent cards. I'm not asking for much. I'm always down for interaction in these, like, colors. Not, like, I don't want, like, blue counterspell. Maybe, like, a more supercharged version of, like, Bolt Ben or Imp's Mischief and those kind of things. I like stuff like that. To Bolt's Trickery, but maybe, you know, a little bit more focus. Like I like 1 mana interaction like that, even if it's limited or damages you, that still gives these decks the ability to play the game and not always be dead. You know, dead to like the card advantage, everything else, just giving it just enough to help fight through it. Or if you want to print more like defense grid like cards, I would be totally fine with stuff like defense grid or like a red pseudo silence or things like that. They don't even have to be as broken as the original counterparts. They just have to be good enough to be played.
Like especially for green, like, you know, green has like Dosen. You can do, that's in pie. I'm assuming Dosen's on like a color pie break. I don't know, but
no, it was the original one, like because Dosen was basically mimicked after
City of Solitude, kind of, right?
City of Solitude. So those were the first 2 like of those real effects, and somehow, White has gotten all of them since then.
White getting the super version of that is kind of weird. Because white is like the symmetry color.
Why not print a like a green Dosen instant? Like 1 green, it has Dosen's effect. Not a silence, but pretty cool. You know what I'm saying? I'll take it at sorcery speed. I don't care at this point, you know?
Let's look at some pretty simple ones. These are some cycles we'd like to see completed or reprinted. Big one that I think is one of these 2 I think are pretty likely this year, and that is the completion of the Horizon Lands cycle, which only needs 4. 6 of them are done. And then a reprint of the ally fetch lands.
Yeah, super simple, very clean. The Horizon lands, I don't know why they keep reprinting the green white one and everything they can. I think
Yeah.
I opened one in like a Lord of the Rings
Yeah,
pack.
they put it in the Lord Precon. I think all of them
Yeah,
ended up in precons, or most of them, but they didn't finish the cycle.
yeah, they were also, I believe, in the Doctor Who stuff too, right?
Yes, I think some of them are in there, which is
Yeah,
good.
but we
Reprints are good, but we can put, and maybe they just don't want to put something that desirable in like a commander product, that like a land for its very first printing. I could kind of see that. But yeah,
Yeah.
these, if you're gonna do it, it needs to be now. And it seems like so far what they're going to do is Horizon Lands, Fetch Land reprint, Horizon Lands, Fetch Land reprint, but waiting until Modern Horizons 4 for another Fetch Land reprint I think is just outrage. I think that would be just terrible. I think it's way too long.
Yeah, I think so. My personal take is I think we're going to see the fetch lands this year in MH3 because that would complete, like they did the retro fetches. Then now we have the retro shocks, and then now they have the retro fetch lands. But they may not want to do shocks and fetch lands in the same set in the same year. And they want to expand that cash cow a little bit because people can talk about how they like, oh yeah, Ravnica remastered. I got my favorite Niv Mizzet card or whatever. No, it's always about the shock lands. That's what people want. To this day, it doesn't matter if they're $1 if they tank. People will. I'm never going to be upset opening up a shock land in a pack.
Yep. So these are pretty simple. There are multiple, and it's getting to the point now where there are more products where this is possible than there used to be because we have more and more products that aren't standard focused. They're not very likely to put fetch lands into standard ever again, but they could throw them in Assassin's Creed. Like it would be weird. But if you're worried about Assassin's Creed selling, throw some fetch lands in there. You could do it. Put the Horizon lands in there or whatever. Or next year in Final Fantasy, they could put stuff. They have so many different places to put it. These would be nice to see. We don't usually talk about like finance stuff and reprints here, but fetch lands, especially if events become less proxy friendly, those being very, very accessible to people is very important. And they're not reprinting dual lands anytime soon. It doesn't look like. So that's not on the list. Abolishing the reserve list, if they do it, awesome. I didn't even put it on the list because it doesn't seem that likely.
All right, what do we got next?
This is one that I'm kind of surprised has avoided this because this card was in, I think, the first Double Masters where lots of iconic cards got new art. Ad Nauseam has yet to get a new art in the, what's it going on, almost 20 years that it's been around. This is like Shards block, mid-2000s. Something like that.
Yeah,
2010s. It's old and it's very iconic, even outside of this format. Like Ad Nauseam has been a deck-defining card in multiple different formats. Let's get new art for it. I know the old art is iconic, but like we don't even have a full art version of it yet. Let's get something. There's other cEDH playables are like iconic cards, and Ad Nauseam is slowly getting a little bit weaker, I think, in cEDH, but people are still gonna run it probably forever. It looks like till we get something much better. So yeah, give us some new Ad Nauseam art.
Yeah, I mean, you telling me like a retro Ad Nauseam wouldn't be hot? Because if you've seen the price of like an Alara block Ad Nauseam foil, it's pretty expensive. So
yeah, even just a new treatment on the old, I think it should just get somebody to do a new art for it in like either a master set or like a secret lair or whatever. But just like a treatment for it, yeah, like old border Nas could be cool for lots of cards. They're doing the retro thing, so give us a Galaxy foil Ad Nauseam.
Or just give us Infinity in Japanese. That would be nice too.
But yeah, that would be nice too. In general, getting all products in all languages would be a huge upside. Not just, of course, for collectors because they like, their whatever language, but like, I mean, there are people who they can't read English. There shouldn't be, having cards, I think of any type that just don't exist in your native language sucks. So, and they don't support every language, but at least getting the majority of products in the majority of the languages they support, that would be just a huge accessibility and collectability win. One thing that we are actually kind of already getting a bit of that we haven't really talked about is a little bit of love officially from Wizards of the Coast. We're having MagicCon events that are commander tournaments. They aren't cEDH, and that's not a term you're very likely to ever hear them say, but very much like saying, hey, bring your best commander deck to play in this competitive event to earn prizes. And that's kind of like the most we've ever got from them. And we're getting that this year. We didn't talk about it, I don't think, when it first got announced, but that's like huge already. And I believe if I remember correctly, it's using Command Tower software,
It is using Command
which
Tower.
is super sick, really awesome. And what we'd like to see, so that's already happening, which is already like could have been on this wish list. But what we would really like to see is an event. That's kind of like a side event. I think an event that prioritizes that as the main draw of it, like a Magic Con at the end of the year that's like a big commander focused thing that is all about a commander event, and maybe they even go out of their way to make sure that pro players show up for it. That would be so sick, and is like not that on it, like that's just a step above what they're already doing. Like I don't think that's completely off the table. That seems like a natural evolution of what they already have planned for this year, and I think that would be like really sick, and you could absolutely expect us to cover it and be going into the deck list and just gushing over like high level players hopefully showing up for that. I think that would be so sick.
Again, we've talked about this before where we basically predicted that cEDH was going to go through like this massive like growth. It was going to attract other TOs. And I specifically remember one comment that goes, outside of like Monarch and Eminence, who else is there? Who else? I remember that comment to this day. And then, now there's like, there's so many TOs out there. cEDH has grown so much. Again, using the Command Tower software, you can go see all the events that are being ran. Salt Monolith, 10K, bang, right there. Mythic Lotus doing their events, Chaos doing their events. You also have Mox Masters. You have Eminence doing their big in-person, paper events. You have SEG. That is just a very, very small sample size of that versus to all the other countries running their events too.
Yeah.
They have quite a bit. So
there's been like there's a big push for like a circuit kind of thing in Europe this year.
Will we ever officially see like a cEDH kind of set up for Wizards? Maybe, maybe not. But I feel like, again, what Matt alluded to was, and I recently listened to the episode of the Eternal Glory podcast with Bosch and Roll, Thraven U, and Brian Cook of the Epic Storm. And Brian Koval, Bosch and Roll, mentioned basically instead of like taking the influencers that they have in their little commander sections, like hosting like a draft or something or a sealed with them in it. That way it would attract more players to it. If you basically take that same theory and apply it to a commander event, look at your ambassador list, who play cEDH, or even those who don't play cEDH to play like commander, see if that's something that they'd be interested in. And then like have a big tournament with them in it as well. And then that way people can come and play against them and with them. And it would just ultimately be like a big commander event, and people would inherently bring probably their best decks to play in it. So I think that would be a great step in that direction. And then, have it at a time of the year where it's not competing with the Pro Tour or something like that. Cause that's kind of the problem. Like that's what's really preventing a lot of these players. And I've talked to like some of them and have read about it, and they've mentioned it in their own channels where they're like, yeah, I like Commander, I'd play, but I'm a pro Magic player, or I'm a Magic player that plays for financial gain. That's my livelihood. So it doesn't behoove me to play a commander event, but they like commander. They play with their friends. They even have cEDH decks. Now, we've already seen a jump of several high level commander players kind of like mixing it up, trying it out. Like I said, the day that we see like a Reed Duke, or an LSV or anybody of that caliber, like kind of come over and play, it would just be, I think, a big win for Magic as a whole, because then that shows that Magic can cross barriers in formats and stuff like that. Because they do print Commander product.
One thing I would like to see kind of more generally, we talk about how great mid-range is and all, these little cards that instantly get you value and blah, blah, blah. I would like to see more turbo-oriented cards, very proactive leaning, all in, however you want to describe it, cards that reward that sort of play style, as well as, I'm not just a turbo brain player. I also think making Stax more of a viable archetype. Like as bad as turbo is doing compared to mid-range, Stax is not on the map, really. Making cards that are powerful if you build around them to break them, that's very fair, I think. That's making a symmetrical kind of piece like that for Stax is good. I think even though Arcana Myria is partially not symmetrical, which I think is weird, those kind of designs to me are fine. Making a really powerful card like that is something I'd like to see, and clearly those kind of decks could use an injection if we want to think about this format as, Stax, mid-range, and turbo fighting it out. We talked about this in the last episode. It's not really how the game actually looks right now. And I think if you want that, and that's probably healthy, then you need an injection of cards that make those things good. If your green turbo deck or whatever gets access to a silence, probably don't need more in white. I think they have enough of those. But that kind of thing that helps you break through the mid-range slog, if you're not going to ban cards that make that mid-range slog enabled, you have to ban, or you have to make things that break through it. Stax pieces that affect those, like if something that can punish draw. I think Orcish Bowmasters was a nice start. A Stax piece that actually hits mid-range instead of turbo would be really nice. Because a lot of the pieces stop the decks that aren't dominant.
Something I would like to see would be, and Matt, you'll probably have to correct me on this, but I feel like, because we did a video where we talked about like which sets a while back when we talked about sets that changed cEDH.
That was pre-podcast. That was the recording we did. Yeah.
I thought Commander Legends was like exactly what the format needed at the time. It brought a lot of speed to the format. It obviously gave us cards like Roger or Rockbrack, Jessica's Will, those kind of cards. I feel like there was maybe some. I mean, Hull Breacher was whatever.
Hull Breacher, Op Agent, Jeweled Lotus,
Op Agent,
very speeding up things.
But that's what we need. If Turbo, and we'll say Turbo in like the sense of like Rakdos X or whatever, it could be Turbo anything, but we'll just say that. You need more efficient rituals. It can't just be all in on dark Writ. And Culling Ritual, actually probably the most powerful recent ritual.
Yeah.
And it has like where it like blows up everything to or less. So we'll say like Culling Ritual. That was probably like the last powerful big ritual that we had that also isn't inherently ubiquitous because not every deck gets to play it. Like Blue Farm doesn't get to play that kind of card. So any card that kind of helps speed up the format that's still punishable by the Stax effects that we talked about, like the rule of law like effects or Thalia and those kind of things. But that's what that format needs. It needs some speed, because if you really think about it, like all the rituals and stuff that we play are old. They're from long ago. Jessica's Will, very powerful card. Also super limited in the commanders that it's played with. Things that help speed up the format, that make it more efficient. So now, let's say Turbo becomes dominant, and then you inject new Stax cards. Stax can customize their deck to attack doing it. It's kind of hard just to attack this mid-range, meta game that also can just, blow the doors wide open with a rat like a Cyclonic Rift or something. That's kind of always been the issue with Stax.
You kind of almost need, because Stax actually does have the tools to pretty effectively beat up most of what turbo decks are doing. It makes it to where the turbo decks kind of have to play to some kind of in-game thing like a Psych Rift or newer options that have come out, right? So I think you actually, it is a scenario where you can just buff turbo and it buffs Stax. And it doesn't have to be like designs like we've seen. So like the best ritual in the format's Dockside Extortionist. Not even close. Dockside Extortionist is not designed like a ritual. It's designed like it making treasure specifically means you don't have to do this all in. Well, this is the time to do it. Play the dockside thing. You just get to let it sit around. So you don't have to make designs that are so good that they go in every deck. Because like, I think, Cabal Ritual is a good example of like a ritual that is good and strong and you're not cutting it. It doesn't go into every single deck in the format. It goes into most of them. So there's some middle ground, especially if you start looking at like if you make it specifically a Rakdos card, like it has a Rakdos casting cost, that you can make something, really strong. You could also, there are even designs that they've made that are close in terms of what they do, that they're just not cheap enough, or they're hard to enable. Like we talk about, like if Blood for the Blood God was actually good, that would be insane. If that was like, if your deck could consistently cast that for its minimum cost, you would run that all the time. You would love, that'd be like your best card. There have been things that get close, but yeah, I think something that can have a downside, every ritual is like a card negative thing, but doesn't need to be as ubiquitous as like a Dockside. Dockside, not a design you want to implement more of, I don't think. I actually do think just buffing Turbo makes Stax playable again, if you do it well enough, but also doing, more of the like white designs that hate on card draw. We have like one or two of them. Things that, Orcish Bowmasters, I think, has been a net positive. But if you wanted to make a black card that always punished the person who is drawing it, like a Shield or whatever, that's a little bit cheaper. Maybe the effect is not, quite at Shield or whatever. Scale it down to be more efficient. Like doing things that punish what's good. If what's good is boring and bad, which I kind of think it is a positive. And so I think that focusing on a few of those. And most of them don't necessarily have to ruin the game. Hull Breacher was maybe their plan to do this, but that was just not the way to do it at all. You don't have to make a hull breacher. So yeah, I definitely think there's room to do this. There are plenty of designs you could do that more all-in decks would play, or Staxy decks that actually want to target mid-range, but they have to stop designing these broken mid-range cards to make it work. Last one I would like to see maybe fewer commanders with a bit more thought put into their design. And generally, if you want to make generically powerful commanders, I think you do it at lower color identity. I think that's one way to kind of get around things. And you don't have to make them purely generically powerful. It can be like generically powerful with synergistic upside. I think Kennon's a good example of like, you have to build around it, kind of, but also you just, turns out all the cards you're building around it are mostly good, but with some downside. If Kennon didn't have to play the giant big creatures, like if it had a payoff that was also like cheap mana production stuff, like there's somewhere in that space I think is good. And if Kennon had an extra color, it would be tearing up the entire format. I think that's the other part of it. Like, you can make designs that strong. I mean, Winota was an example that we had, when it was really dominant. I would like to see 1 and 2 color decks be very good. I can't currently recommend people. I actually actively recommend people not play monocolor decks, especially if you're getting into the format. There aren't really many that are actually playable. None of them have any level of success. Sure, you could say you can play whatever you want, and you can, but I recommend new people pick up things that work. It's hard to recommend a monocolor deck. There are 2 color ones. Again, like Cannon is just like very easy to recommend. Eurocode to an extent too. But yeah, I would really like to see 2 color commanders that are a little bit more built around, and just in general synergistic commanders. But especially, I think the more low color decks there are, that inherently makes a lot more variety of things that you see. For the most part, I think that's just all upside.
Yeah, I think a great example of a commander that kind of did a very good job of this was like the new Obnixilis.
Yes.
It's 2 colors, it's powerful, it's got a build around to it. At first, everybody was just jamming every kind of pinger in the deck, but now they've like really refined the list. And like, I'm a big fan of Obnixilis. I think that it's super sweet.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great example of something of that power level design. If you're going to do kind of that low color, like I think Menzkenbu, the red green Menzkenbu is pretty good. Atali, another really kind of cool 2-colored card that kind of does the Gruul thing. I don't know, from a cEDH perspective, it's kind of tough because obviously, again, cEDH is not inherently what they print for. And like when they did the Dominaria set where they had like, I don't know, every card felt like a legend in the set.
Yeah.
It was pretty ridiculous. And how many of those like commanders from Dominaria translated to cEDH? You just had a set that was nothing but legends effectively. And I know Shieldred. I was in that set. And it translated to cEDH.
It's weird because so many of the designs now, and this is something I would just like to see less of in general. A lot of designs that are, one, they just make a thing a legend. Just kind of do it. It doesn't even necessarily need to be that good of a commander. It's just like, why not? Whatever. People might use it as their commander. People might like it. It might be a character people like. We just don't make it powerful. But there are so many commanders that are just like, okay, this is a thing people want a deck for. They want a commander deck to build around this. Let's make the commander for that. The deck essentially builds itself in its entirety because it rewards this thing that only this commander rewards. And then I think it's just a negative for everybody because it's usually weak. It has no real like deck building. Like, I see a lot of those commanders and you immediately like, oh man, that's so cool. And then you go to build it and you're just like, oh, I just put the 30 cards to do this. And then there's nothing else I do as a deck builder. Within a week, EDH rec is just the same 5,000 decks of that commander. And because it's just reward the thing people want, and there's no ability to be creative when you do that a lot of times. Because the thing usually has to be narrow for it to be requested, because at this point there's like 50,000 commanders. Most of the things have a commander for them. So I hate those designs. That was one thing that got me out of casual, because almost every single commander that comes out is either generically powerful, not that exciting to build around, but is so niche in what it does that there's no interesting builds because you're just running the cards that do that thing. They're almost all net negative. I really want less of both of those things. But if you're going to make it generically powerful, make it low color. Having like 2 things the commander cares about that have enough overlap that you can do something but are broad enough to where there's like build, like again, like Kennen is a good example, maybe on the stronger side of what your average commander is. You can make commander strong and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know. I just had to go on my rant about those designs because there were so many. When I was into casual, I built decks every single day and new sets would come out and it's like God, 90% of these commanders, there's just nothing to build.
And you think that they're going to slow down? Well, just wait till 2025 when we get the Marvel Universe and
Yeah,
Commander. I
that's
mean, that's real. That's happening.
it's a big thing with crossovers specific, like Universes Beyond, like Lord of the Rings, a great example. Had a crazy amount of legends, very high amount of legends, because everything about any Universes Beyond crossover naturally pushes you towards focusing on the characters people know. People don't, they're not like, oh man, I can't wait until unnamed Hobbit shows up. Like, and the set, like, you know, people care about Orcish Bowmasters because it's very powerful, but like no one was thinking like, oh man, when they get the orcs that shot Isildur, oh, that's gonna be so sick. Nobody was waiting for those cards.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny. Yeah, so we get was it next year we get
got Final Fantasy.
and X-Men, right? Is that 2025 or is that 2026?
I don't know if it's
Or not
said,
just
just
X-Men,
Marvel.
but just Marvel. Yeah,
I think
it's Marvel,
something
sorry.
in 2025.
Okay,
It's
so
not,
we'll say 2025.
Yeah.
Somebody in the comments below can correct us, but we get Final Fantasy and Marvel, which is going to be based on the comic books, not the movie sets.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see which comic books they pull from because you have some legendary like runs of these famous like series. Like, are we going to see, the Clone Wars or the Clone Saga with Spider-Man? We're going to see
Ben
the
Riley
Armor
Commander.
Wars.
That'd be cool.
My only ask for the Chris Wishlist, the Christmas wish list moving forward would be like Carnage is probably red black.
Of course.
Venom is black, maybe Golgari, something like that, or just mono black.
Yeah.
Something like that. I feel like that's fair. I'm just afraid they're gonna like. I don't know who's working on this design, but I'm just afraid they're gonna like look at Captain America and be like, oh, he's red, white, and blue, right? And
Which
it's like,
they
no,
did. They did this with Guile. They made him red, white,
Yeah.
and blue because he's USA. That's his whole thing.
That makes no sense at all. Like when you look at Captain America is probably like red, white.
Probably like red, white. You could maybe argue like blue, white, but it's probably Boros.
Yeah, he's probably like a Boros commander. Iron Man is mono red, industrial artifact tech.
He's definitely he's probably is it, right? He's very
he's a
blue. I mean,
genius.
He's trying to build like, the perfect everything.
Yeah, Spider-Man could be like teamer, because he's ultra smart and also he's a spider, so so he's got the powers of the spider. So that could be like a teamer Spider-Man. Hulk's gonna be green,
But all of these things we're talking about these are all going to be legendary characters. Almost every Universes Beyond set, Final Fantasy is going to be characters from every single game 1 through 16. That's like a billion different legendary characters. There's not. I would say that one probably suits itself well to non-legendary that are iconic because there's all kind of monsters and different things you fight and like different like NPCs and like races and whatever, just like different people of different jobs that are iconic to that series. So that one, maybe they don't have to dig or dive so deep into the legendary theme, but like legendary as a theme, there's a if you listen to like the Drive to Work podcast where he talks about Lord of the Rings, it's like it was just like a no-brainer that had to do a legendary sub theme for that set because we have to get every single character into the set because people want all of them. And then also like, well, this is 3 books. This is a huge saga. We kind of can't do just one character of Aragorn. Like we need Aragorn when you first meet him, when he's like basically an exile on the run from his life. And then also when he is the king and also like at the end of his life, like all these different parts. And then they're going to do this for Marvel too. They're going to do this for so many different things. Like legendary creature type is really getting put to work.
Yeah. So you're going to have Weapon X Wolverine.
Oh God. There's too many. That's the thing with Marvel. You could do Spider-Man as a set. There's so much to pull from. You could absolutely fill a set with nothing but Spider-Man and his rogues gallery and the people he works with. And there's enough there. And you could do this for almost every single Marvel character. There's so much to pull from.
So you're telling me that here's what a Commander game's going to look like in 2025. Yeah, so I'm going to equip Spider-Man's web shooters to
Sephiroth.
To Sephiroth. I'm going to attack you with Bahamut. I'm gonna I've got somebody holding like Negan's bat. It's so funny that basically Magic the Gathering, and I'm not faulting them at all. Like as a company, I'm not faulting them in terms of their financial gain on this. Like that's not my concern as a player. It's just, to me, it's hilarious. It's like we've become the Super Smash Brothers of
or Fortnite. Definitely, like
Oh,
we're very
gross.
Fortnite, just everything.
That's gross.
But yeah.
I mean, they did a
And-
Fortnite secret lair,
yeah.
so
It's not necessarily a
know.
negative. This was not the topic here, but there's so much to talk about with it because it is the lens Magic will be seen through. Like Lord of the Rings was like the most eyes that it has ever been on Magic, with like the One Ring and then the Post Malone buying it, and just like the biggest IP they've ever teamed up with, you know, one of the biggest IPs ever. I don't think it's a negative, but it definitely changes the game. It definitely changes things a lot. Maybe
Yeah, I
if
will
you guys
say-
are interested, maybe we'll talk about that more. I actually thought it would when we started talking about the Marvel stuff and things we could see. It is really cool, but I know that that could be its own. I could talk about that for hours, and don't really have time for that in just this one episode.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you could probably take a lot of whatever the ideas from the Versus series card game and then implement that in your own way, because it had some really cool stuff and factions and whatnot. Like, I am very excited for the ability to play with Doctor Doom. That's all.
Oh
that's
yeah, it's gonna be
like,
sick.
I love Doctor Doom. I think he's the man. He's great. So I'm pretty excited. Hopefully, Doctor Doom is going to be like super sweet.
That's definitely on the wish list for next year. Is an awesome, perfect Doctor Doom commander. Doctor Doom with cEDH playable, that'd be so freaking sick. All right, folks. I think we've covered most of our wish list. Let us know down below, what do you want to see for this year of Magic? What are you hoping to see? I'm excited for just the themes of the sets. We didn't want to dive into like what specifically I want to go into for each set, but yeah, I think getting a horror set, like a modern horror set, is super cool. Wild West, Bloomborough, all the sets that are coming out, barring kind of Assassin's Creed, I'm not excited about that, are really cool. And even that could have some cool cards in it at least. So yeah, let us know down below what you'd like to see for this year. What do you think, 24 is going to be like for competitive Commander and tournaments? Last year was the biggest year ever by far. I would not be surprised if this year just blew that out of the water. And I really hope it does. If you enjoyed this video, let us know down below if you liked it. Consider subscribing, about to hit 6K. I'd like to do that. That's on my wish list for this year, to hit 10K. I'd really like to hit 10K this year. I'm going to do my best to keep videos coming out that, make you want to subscribe. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.